Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's Expert Insight series. Today we're talking about small renovations that make a big difference. We are focusing very much on renovations and the effects that they can have within your homeowners association or your body corporate, what rules you need, understanding insurance policies and the requirements from a process perspective, and then of course the creative and the fun side of it, which is, sorry ladies, not to say that the rules and the insurance is not fun, but then the creative side where we get to talk about a little bit about color and renovations themselves. So before we get going and I introduce the panel, just a little bit of housekeeping. The idea behind our webinars is always to create a live environment where you can ask questions. So in the front of your screen, you can see our panelists, but behind the scenes, we've got some keyboard warriors that are there to help you with any direct questions that you might have. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you will see a little icon that says chat. It pulls up a chat box. If you could post your questions there, make sure that you've highlighted everyone so that we can all see and answer. And in that way, we can share the information. We're also recording this webinar so that we will share the recording with those who have requested the recording, and they can then see the comments that are happening in the chat box. Throughout the webinar this morning, we also run a few polls. So the polls are really just for us to understand, who's listening, what type of information is relevant to you, what are you looking for, so that we can structure our Expert Insight series. One of the polls have come up now, so you can just have an answer. Once you've answered it, you can just click on the little red icon in the corner and the poll will disappear and it won't bother you. And the same is for the panelists, just get it out of your way. You can't answer. So it's just best to get it out of the line of sight. So when we were putting this webinar together, we always lean on an industry, on the environment of expertise that are out there that are here to assist you. And so we're very, very happy today to have a panel that are representing three different sides of the industry. So Carol Ras, who's the market manager of Plascon. She focuses on professionals, so professional products, and she's here to talk a little bit about color, to talk about the different types of paint solutions, product, and also what you sort of can do, and a bit of a color range and a few other additional services that they offer that will assist you. We then thought to ourselves, what else do we need, especially working in a HOA and working with body corporates, needing to understand the insurance requirements of the environment. Now, it sounds a bit sort of strange, insurance requirements of environments, but there are three sides to that. So the requirements that you need up front when you're wanting to start the process, the requirements that you need during the course of your renovations, and then of course, as you add value to your product, to your home, how do you adjust that evaluation, and what do you need at that point? So we're very excited to have Carla with us today, and she's going to be talking about Outsurance. Now, living in an HOA or homeowners association or a body corporate, it's all about the rules. So as much as we want to renovate and paint and do all of our fantastic creative things to our homes, we need to sit within those guidelines of our homeowners association, bearing in mind that the guidelines and rules of a homeowners association or body corporate is really there to maintain the overall asset value of the community as a whole, ensuring everybody's property value increases and that the whole community flourishes. So Zerlinda is joining us from TVDM Consultants, and she's going to be chatting to us about what that side of the environment looks. So we're going to get going, but just where this idea sort of started is, we at Estate Living, we work with a number of different affiliates. And if we don't answer any of our questions that you're needing answered today, if we don't answer it in this particular webinar, please refer to our affiliate page, and you will find a number of service providers that are working within the industry that you can lean on for information, or you can contact Jamie Lee and myself directly as well. So as I was saying, the reason for us looking at renovations is work from home office spaces People having a bit of time in the house doing a bit of work, maybe folks having a bit of extra disposable income, children getting older, our life stage is changing, the way we live changing, our requirements changing, solar solutions, power solutions, internet solutions. All of this leads to a home that is being renovated at various levels. And so because of that, we thought to ourselves, let us assist the market and bring some of that information to you if this is what you're looking for. So I hope you enjoy today's webinar, and thank you again to the team that are joining me. And perhaps Carol, let's kick off with some creative energy, because it is a beautiful day today here in the Western Cape. So let's kick off with a bit of creative energy, and maybe we can start with, if you are looking to do renovations, often a good paint job is a solution. So can you start with that loaded statement, and
yes.
And maybe tell us a little bit about that process?
Okay, thanks, Louise. Yes, it is an exciting industry, and funnily, a lot of females land up in this industry, and I think it's driven by the creativity side and the color side. But I think the key thing is that your room becomes a blank canvas. So especially on the interiors where you can personalize your space, whether it's a dining area or a living room or a bedroom or a study, you can personalize it to create the kind of mood that you're looking for by the use of color. Important to consider some color therapy in those instances, because certain colors have different impacts on our bodies and minds. For instance, you wouldn't want to go and paint a bedroom for a hyperactive child in a bright yellow or red. So you'd have to kind of consider what are the best colors to use that would be sort of neutral and relaxing and calming. But if you're looking at for a study environment, yellows, even lighter yellows, stimulating the mind, turquoises, those kind of colors would be ideal to put into that type of environment, because you're wanting your mind to be stimulated, but you also don't want to be overstimulated where it kind of builds up a bit of stress. But I think if you take into account that personal space, there's a lot that you can do with that. I mean, I always talk about a blank canvas. So if we work with a 60-30-10 principle, which is something that, even our color combination for next year is no longer based on color of the year, we're talking about color combinations. To use that 60-30-10, where 60 is your main wall area, your 30% would be made up out of either, your feature wall, your furniture, your curtains and carpeting, and then the 10% would be your little accessories that bring in a little pop of color. So it could be your cushions or your ornaments or a vase or a plant, just to bring in a nice little mixture of colors.
You mentioned that you bring in a range, you no longer sort of a color of a year, but rather a range of colors. And Jamie Lee will pop that new 2022, is that correct, range in the chat box for those to see. So maybe explain just a little bit I'm a bit of a layman, and so the 60-30-10 principle. So 60% of the color selection, is that what you're saying, should come from the wall, or is it 60% of your base, a neutral color should be from the wall?
Of your room, your base should really be your main walls. So say if you've got 3 of the walls are painted in neutral, maybe. If I look at our combination of the year, our color is called Pear Fantasy. So that is more sort of a neutral beigey kind of color. And then you would take your 30%, which is our desert water. It's a blue color, but you might find that there's a blue in your couches, or there's a blue in your carpets, or you've put up blue curtains. So it would be like your next dominant color. You might want to have a blue feature wall. And then your 10%, which we call Zanzibar, it's like a dark kind of charcoal gray. That would be nice for maybe a separate chair that's maybe covered as an armchair. It could be a vase, it could be a pot plant, it might be a lamp, or even elements of those colors could be mixed in cushions. So you could really kind of coordinate those colors together. But if our audience wants to go onto our website, there is a color wheel that you can play around with, that you could select your main color. You could photograph your room and upload it, and then select the main color, and it'll bring up the various complementary and colors that you could use with that main color. So there is a bit of color guidance. You could also phone our color specialists. So there's different people. So for consumers, there's a color specialist that can assist you. And then we've also got a color specialist to help for the architects and the estates, and more your corporate type of clients.
Yeah, we used that service when we had a flood in our office. We used that color service, and it really had a great result. So it made for a much more dynamic work environment. But now my work environment is at my house. So do you think that from a color perspective, we should be separating our work environment from a color perspective? Or in my case, my work environment is kind of my dining room. Is there ways in which we can sort of add these stimulating colors into that space without repainting the whole area?
Yeah. So ideal colors for study environments are kind of your pastel yellows and peaches, a bit of turquoise. But if you start going like reds and yellows, it could possibly become overstimulating. Grey might have a draining effect. So, I think there's so much to color therapy, and I'm no specialist in it, but we can definitely assist if anybody's wanting us to specifically look at their environments. If you are using your study, your kitchen or your dining area as a work area, it depends on the color, because if you've painted that with a stimulating color or a red or a maroon or something, you might actually have a negative impact on your study area or your work environment. So it very much depends. Also lighting, how much lighting is coming into the room, because lighting can also have an effect on the color and the space, like constricting the space as opposed to opening it up a little bit more.
So, we talk about the interior, but also the exterior often. And this was one of the questions that I asked you, I think, when we were prepping for this webinar, is we often, outdoor living within residential communities and even within sectional title developments is an important part of it, unless it's not possible. So if I have a small balcony or patio or stoep that I want to, use, but, if you look at the advertising you see in magazines, often the spaces are really large. How can I take my small space and using color, make it feel that it's a little bit larger? Is there some tips you could give us?
I think from a balcony perspective, it's a bit harder. And also if you're restricted by the estate's color selection. So it's very important to be aware of what the color range is for that estate, but you could select colors within that and then maybe bring a bit of color in, because if you've got a small little courtyard, or you could always look at a feature wall or a braai area. You might bring in a little bit of color in terms of the furniture that you put into that outdoor space, or maybe planters that you could put up, and then often you see these very nice little decals and things that people put on the walls in some of the lifestyle areas, but it's really hard if you kind of got one wall, that's all you can really do with it. You'd have to bring that other elements in through different pieces, whether it's furniture or something else.
Yeah, we'll refer to Zerlinda for the rules around that. Just my last just whilst I've got you in the hot seat here, just my last few questions. So we also said again, like, people are scared of paint and color. Like you think painting your house is a go-to renovation solution, but it's also quite daunting and can be costly. So And also there are various paints available depending on who you are. So it's not just about color, but also about the consistency and the type of paint and the effects of that paint. Environmentally friendly paints, or I don't think environmentally friendly is the right word, but paints that don't affect those who might suffer from allergies and things like that. Could you give us any advice on choosing those kind of healthier options, if you could say that very loosely?
So very often the eco-friendly paints are a little bit more pricey. And it also depends on the individual person, you know, how sensitive are you to allergy or allergic reactions to things like solvents. But your more premium paints are generally free of VOCs. They're a lot, you know, even the colorants that are used in there are glycol free. So you can go to a slightly more expensive paint, but there are still good quality, low VOC products that you can use at different price points. So there are products within different price points to suit everybody's budget. And it's more important from an interior perspective to be aware of it. So a product, one of Plascon's premium products is Double Velvet, which is a zero VOC product. And it's also very good for absorbing sort of VOCs in the room. So for instance, like fumes that are coming out of your furniture or your carpeting, if you put in new carpeting, those fumes get absorbed into the paint and it dies off. So it's an air purifying property that the product has brought out. So very nice that you can actually use it and sleep in the room on the same day. But, you know, you also, I think it's important to think about things like, you know, what type of finish are you looking for? Are you looking for a sheen, which is maybe more luxurious? Or are you going to go for something more contemporary in a matte finish? Because matte is also a very a more suitable product to use if you've got plaster imperfections. So, you know, the type of finish of the product that you're using is important. I think it's also important to know what is the colors for your estate. And then, you know, is there texture to the wall? Because if there is a texture to the plaster, you're going to use about 60% more paint than if you were painting on a smooth finish. So those are things you need to take into account. And then I think most important when it comes to preparing is not to be overwhelmed. You know, it's a step-by-step process. And a key thing is to focus on the preparation, because your end finish is only going to be perfect if you've gone through the process properly. So it's not to rush that, but really focus on, you know, what substrate are you painting? What condition is it in? Do you need to fill cracks? How do you go about filling those cracks and preparing that surface properly before you start applying the paint? You know, don't skimp on things like tools, like rollers and brushes, because you're going to land up with little hairs and things all over your walls. So it's not just about the quality of the paint. It's important in terms of the preparation, and then also the application of the paint is going to give you that perfect finish. So things like that to be aware of. I think when you spoke a bit earlier to me about guarantees, that is a very important factor. So, you know, also the more advanced the technology, the higher the guarantee will be. However, we still need to take into account the fact that there's a life expectancy. So you might use a high quality paint on the coastal area, but now you're dealing with sea spray. If you're in an area that's got an airport, you're dealing with pollution. So those elements you have to still consider. So you might have a guarantee, but the life expectancy of that coating might not be the 12 years or the 15 years, depending on the environment in which you live. But knowing that, I think the importance then comes in, are you doing that continuous maintenance of your property? Because I'm sure from an insurance point of view, if something had to go wrong and you haven't been maintaining the property, it's going to be a lot harder to claim for that. And I mean, our Outsurance specialists can maybe give more input into that. But I think a guarantee is really a benchmark of what that product's performance can be. but the environment in which it is used is a guideline in terms of what is the life expectancy of that paint actually going to be. So those are just a couple of little things that maybe need to be considered as well. You know, what is the life stage? If it's inside and your children are growing, you might start off with a baby room, and 2 or 3 years later, you want to change it for a toddler or a slightly bigger kid. Whereas the exterior of your house, you're not going to paint as frequently. So you would want to use, you know, a better quality, a better guarantee, something on the outside, because also generally inside we paint ourselves. You know, we'll tackle that room on our own. Whereas on the exterior, we generally get a paint professional in to assist us, because that could actually be quite a major job. So those are little things that I think we must just consider. I don't know if that's answered your question, Lou.
Yes, absolutely. That's definitely answered my question. And just to note there, so in your professional range, if you are offering a service to a property developer, you then require you know, your sort of affiliated workmen to install the paint, or to come in and actually do the paint job for that guarantee. But in an end user environment, I could paint my house myself and still have the guarantee. Is that correct?
So the guarantees work slightly differently for homeowners versus the trade, because the risk for us is lower, and we have a little bit more control over the preferred applicators who are applying the paint. So, you know, the preferred applicators, you know, we've assessed their workmanship. We're happy that they understand they've been through training of our product. We monitor the sites for them. Whereas a homeowner, we don't get to do that. So we can't be sure of, you know, the level of preparation that's been done. The paint top coat is only as good as the system. So if the preparation hasn't been done, there's a good chance that the paint's going to fall off the wall at some point. So, okay, you know, different rules apply also. We've got rules that apply whether you're a homeowner or a trade professional.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Carol.
Our advisory service can assist with the detail on that type of question.
Yeah. And I think also what's quite handy on your site is the fact that you can go and do a kind of a costing as well. So there's tools on the site that's available based on the size of your property to do a costing before you start your renovations. So I think that, as you mentioned, you know, the quality and insurance and all of these things come into play as well. So I would like, let's turn our attention to that insurance process. So when you're considering looking at doing your renovations, obviously you lean, depending on the scale of the renovations, you're going to lean on professional services. And we have established that those professional services need to be accredited, just, you know, from an insurance perspective. Maybe we can, Carl, if we could just turn the conversation to yourself and just have a look at when you're at that point of starting your renovations, what policies do you need in place, and what is the actual renovators? What is their requirements? So as an end user homeowner, to protect yourself, what can you make sure is that the renovations company has got in place?
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so from an insurance perspective, I think if you look at the sectional title versus a full title property, then the sectional title does give you a bit more admin just to make sure that everything is in place. So if you make use of professional services, they often have insurance cover already of their own, but it's very important for you to make sure that whatever cover they have sufficient cover. So on a building site renovation, you must make sure that they have the employer's liability should something happen and one of their workers get injured or there's damage of some sort. Make sure that they have that type of cover, else the liability will fall upon you as the owner. And then also, if you look at your body corporate insurance, it's also important for you to make sure whether you should have the building insurance or whether your body corporate actually does have the insurance for everyone at that specific property. So just make sure that you do have the cover, that there's also not dual insurance. So your body corporate might have cover for fire, theft, subsidence, everything included already, then you don't need to have that, take out that cover. But they might not have it. So make sure that what they have in place is giving you the most comprehensive cover that you actually need. So I would suggest definitely to always ask your body corporate to get their insurance policy and make sure what is covered there. And then to ask if you need any additional cover, ask them whether they will obtain it or whether you should obtain it yourself. It's very important, like you guys mentioned, to have someone qualified work at your with you on your renovations, because that will or can and will most probably impact the outcome of a claim should there be any claim in the future. So make sure that they have the qualifications that you need to be able to have a valid claim.
So, so once you started your renovations, you've now checked with your BC or your homeowners association, you've got your policies in place. Does that policy then run for the duration of the renovations, or does it extend for the duration of the renovation plus the duration until all the snags have been signed off? Or how long do you run that policy for, or just as long as the workmen are on your site?
So your normal buildings insurance that you as the homeowner or then the BC will take out will probably have started when you took or bought the property and will run throughout. So when you start off with your renovation project, it's just important to inform your insurer that you are going to do some renovations. If you are now just painting a wall, then it's not necessarily something that you need to inform your insurer about. But if you're going to restructure some of the walls or you're going to add on to your property, inform them that there's some renovations going to take place, and they will say either yes, the cover is sufficient, or they might give you additional cover. So they might decide to give you some extra liability cover. And you can then have that for the duration of your project. And once the project is finished, you can just lower your limits again on your liability, for example. But what I would emphasize is once you are done, make sure that your property is correctly insured for the correct value. Your addition will probably add some value to your property. So make sure that you update your sum insured values with your insurer to make sure that you are not underinsured should you come at claim stage and you can't actually claim for your full property value. So that's just something that as soon as that project is done, make sure that your values are correct at your insurer.
That was actually an interesting question that came to me prior to the webinar. Was doing renovations on a home is a costly exercise. So if one is building on a work from home office or doing something like that, it can be quite expensive. And the question is, does the cost of that renovation equal in appreciation in value of the home when it comes to on selling a home or making the home more desirable? Now, I'm sure an estate agent would probably be the best person to answer that question, but one can see that homes that have work from home spaces are becoming more desirable as more and more companies choose not to go back to the office. But in your experience, from an insurance perspective, have you found that people are reevaluating their properties currently and looking at a work from home space? What is the industry looking like at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely see that people are working from home, and the type of claims we are experiencing, people are more at home. Their geysers work more often. We get so many more geyser claims. I mean, your power surge claims, you have so many more electronics that are operated from your home, and because people are working from their homes. So yeah, we can definitely see there's a definite move to the working from home. And what I would, so as estate agent would be better to say what the impact on your resale value will be. But what I want to just also emphasize is remember to add those items that you now included in your home for your work from office onto your contents insurance. Do not forget about the items within your house, because that does add up quite quickly. If you just think about I needed to buy computer screens, and I needed to get a laptop, and I needed a keyboard, mouse, chair, table, all those things. Remember that they should also now be included in your insurance cover. to make sure that you are properly insured for should something there happen.
So talking about power surges, we've had a couple of inquiries coming in for this attendees and registries and looking for recordings around solar panel solutions and solar solutions. So although we have many affiliates on our site that can assist with individuals that are looking to install solar solutions, but from an insurance perspective, and we will ask this question to Zerlinda as well, do you need a separate policy, and how would your new solar solution be insured?
So your solar system, if it is fixed to your property, then it will be covered by your normal buildings insurance. Some insurers will actually ask you whether you have, for example, a solar geyser or solar panels. So just if that question has been asked in the past and you said no, just remember to update those policies and to tell them you have added these types of solar systems. But yeah, it is in your normal solar or normal buildings cover, and everything should work as is. Just make sure to update once again your values and then the applicable question if it was asked previously.
Before we move on to Zerlinda, my last question. The festive season is nearly upon us. I'm so excited. And well, I'm actually just excited to go on holiday. And for those of us that are staying home, we could be renovating for family members arriving, but for those who are maybe heading for a holiday house or away, anything that we should just make a checklist and remind ourselves to have in order before we leave when it comes to our policies?
Yeah, so what I like to do is at the end of the year, just have a view over your contents items. Was there any main things or big things, like I mentioned now is working from home, that you bought and added on in your home itself, which will not travel with you to, I don't know, holiday destinations or anywhere else, and just make sure you update those values. Then the good old Christmas gifts, remember to add them onto the policy as well. Jewelry is a favorite of the women. Remember to add that on your all risk policy. If you buy laptops or computer equipment, add that also onto your policy. And then just one thing I think to make also sure of is that your alarm systems, all the security requirements that you have at your house or security devices you install, make sure that works properly, because that will usually also be a condition of your cover if you have disclosed that you have an alarm system at your house. So make sure that it is in working order should something happen whilst you are not at your house, that you have the cover you need.
Sorry, last question. I was going to ask Zerlinda, but just quickly, that's brought up a topic. So is the conditions of cover the same whether you live in an estate and body corporate or if you live in a freestanding home in the neighborhood, or do they differ?
So they can differ, not necessarily based on the full title standalone property compared to a sectional title, but there might be differences in areas. So for example, some areas are very prone to subsidence, so there might be specific conditions and certain certificates you need for a subsidence prone area, or areas which are more prone to theft incidents will have certain conditions of cover to say make sure you have your alarm system working, whereas another more safer security estate village might not have that requirement. So it differs and quite a bit between areas, whether you're in estates or not, residential versus your estates, and there's a lot of differences. So just make sure you read your policy wording and make sure you tick those boxes. The fine print, like they always say.
Yeah, the devil's in the detail. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So looking at that, the different environments have different requirements. I think as we move into our last sort of segment of this particular webinar around renovations, let's talk about the body corporate and homeowner association rules that govern the way in which we choose to renovate. Zerlinda, thank you so much for joining us. So my first question to you is, if I want to do a renovations and I live in a homeowners association, because I know HOAs and BCs are governed by different types of rules, but I live in a homeowners association, and maybe we can answer the same question for a body corporate. What is my first step? Where do I start?
All right. So good morning, everybody, and thank you to Estate Living for including us in this. Very, very interesting thus far. I was about to go and buy some grey paint for this boring wall behind me, but now that I hear that it might be draining, I'll definitely choose a different color. So thank you for that, Carol. So the first thing you need to do in a homeowners association is look at the governance documentation. It's exactly the same in a body corporate. It would be your conduct rules in all likelihood that would have a rule relating to renovations and alterations and any specifications in regard to any particular type of work that is required. If the body corporate doesn't have amended conduct rules, then you need to look at the prescribed conduct and management rules, which will obviously not set specifications for a particular body corporate. It's obviously be a lot more open-ended as to what can and cannot be done. And both in a homeowners association as well as a body corporate, if there are no rules or governance provisions governing renovations and alterations, the body corporate trustees or the homeowners association trustees or directors can't actually enforce it. So in a homeowners association, you want to look at a constitution or a memorandum of incorporation, and along with that there might be supporting documentation such as architectural guidelines or rules, or sometimes estate rules or conduct rules. So that's the first port of call. If you're not able to locate those, or you have questions based on that, the best port of call would be to contact the managing agent or the estate manager or the trustees or directors. But before you do anything, before you contact the contractor or go and buy the supplies, you need to see what the rules say. Otherwise, you might have to revert back to what you had before and after you've spent a whole bunch of money doing it.
That's actually a good insurance question, that if I do go and do my renovations and I do discover, and it happens all of the time, I've done my renovations and I've discovered that there is an issue. What is my process there? Because I know that's a lot of disputes happen because of, it could be color selection, but wall heights, locations of walls, etc. So I've checked my rules, and I now I check my rules, and I feel that my renovations are within the rules. What do I have to get anyone's approval?
Yes. So in a body corporate, you need to again look at those rules, and in most instances, both in a body corporate and a homeowners association, the relevant rules or provisions of the governance documentation is going to require a prior written application to the trustees or directors or the managing agent or the estate manager. That application might be in a prescribed application form, and it's going to set out who you are, where you're wanting to undertake the work. Is it alterations? Is it renovations? And of course, the definition as to what is renovations, what is alterations. It will set out the scope of the work that is wanting to be undertaken, perhaps even a commencement date, a completion date, or an estimated completion date. You know, how you're going to have contractors coming and going, if you're going to require scaffolding, for example, if you're going to require, you know, big heavy trucks to come into the scheme, either the HA or the body corporates, you know, what is the impact going to be on security? And then, of course, it's going to set out, you know, a deposit that will be needed to be paid, a damages deposit, and that might depend on the scope of the works. If it's going to be something quite small, the deposit might be non-existent or very minimal. If it's going to be something large, it could be quite extensive. I've dealt with quite a few body corporates in the Camps Bay area where they charge people, you know, ridiculous amounts of money, large percentages of the renovations and alterations projects, sometimes leading up to the tens or hundreds of thousands of rands. And then, of course, that damages deposit is just for that. It's damages to the common property or to the common areas. Perhaps a big truck has come in and has knocked the gates off its hinges, or off its railing, or you know, hits out somebody's window or something along those lines. So those are the types of specifications that need to be set out in an application. The trustees or or an architectural review committee or the directors or the estate manager will consider the application. They'll make sure that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, a deposit is paid if necessary, and then will grant approval for the work subject to conditions. Alternatively, they could even ask for council approval, for example, if there's plans that are required or proof that council approval is not needed. A homeowners association or a body corporate, provided the governance documentation allow for it, might even require the appointment of a scrutiny architect to actually go and have a look at those plans or that proposed project. One can't assume that every single trustee or director has, an architect degree behind their name. So there might be the necessity of having a contractor like that appointed to make sure that the project is within the scope. And then, of course, during the course of the renovation or alteration, the building manager or the estate manager might come and do inspections. And if there's any costs surrounding that, that might be dealt with in the governance documentation as well. So definitely prior approval is needed, and perhaps even sign off after the project has been completed.
So so would this also come into play if the renovations were interior, or is this only mainly for exterior work?
So a homeowners association might be different, and you have to look at the constitution or the memorandum of incorporation. And the big difference between a homeowners association and a body corporate, obviously, is when you're dealing with a section or a unit in a body corporate, you only own from the median line to the to the inside. The body corporate is common property from the median line to the outside. Whereas when you're looking at a homeowners association, you own your property, your house in its entirety, including the earth upon which that house is built up until the boundary wall, if there is a boundary wall, either shared with the HOA or with the neighbor. So it's quite different. So in most HOAs that I've dealt with, there isn't a requirement to deal with any type of approval for work inside the home, unless there is going to be an aesthetic or an external aesthetic change. And then, of course, when it comes to access into the estate, security, damages, deposits, that will be regulated, but not necessarily what is going on inside your property in an HOA. In a body corporate, it's very different. Even if you are bringing somebody in to, fix your toilet or to change your tiles or to paint a wall, you need to get the body corporate's approval, so the trustee's approval. Not only because you're bringing somebody into the scheme that might pose a security risk or potential damages to the common property, but because anything you do inside your section might have an impact on another unit. So if you were going to undertake a massive bathroom renovation, working on the pipes in your unit is most certainly going to affect the common property stack, let's say. Or if you were going to, change a structural wall, that's going to have a massive implication on the building. So body corporates are quite different in that regard.
So one of my questions that we got prior to the event was if I wanted to put in a swimming pool, or if I wanted to add in a deck and I live in a body corporate, do I need the body corporate's approval? And by the sounds of it, the answer to that is absolutely yes.
Definitely. So I'd like to touch on that swimming pool one quickly. We had a very interesting matter a couple of years ago where in a body corporate, an owner wanted to install a swimming pool in their exclusive use area, and they went ahead and did that without getting any level of consent at all. What was actually an area of common property that they were treating as though it was their exclusive use area. And the neighbor's children started swimming in the swimming pool, and the owner was irate. Obviously, they had paid for it, they paid to maintain it, and they didn't want anybody swimming in their swimming pool. But because the owner had erected that swimming pool on common property in an area that they used as though it was their own, it was actually a benefit to the entire body corporate. And all of the residents, owners, tenants, visitors could come and use that pool. When it comes to, doing something like that on common property or an exclusive use area, you have to look at body corporate liability as well. And this is, Carla's area of speciality when it comes to insurance. You're needing to ensure that if a pool is built in, that it's walled, that there's a gate, that the local municipal bylaws are adhered to from a liability or risk perspective. You don't want that risk on the body corporate or the homeowners association at all. But there is definitely consent that is needed. And in a sectional title scheme, the first thing that you need to do is to determine the nature of the area in which you're wanting to do this renovation or alteration. If it's a section, perhaps trustee consent is needed in terms of the rules. If it's an exclusive use area, ordinary resolution of the members is needed. If it's common property, you can't do something like install a swimming pool, unless, of course, you're wanting to share that enjoyment with everybody else in the scheme.
And in environments like sort of a retirement environments where you've got a life rights development, does the same rules apply then to your life right property, bearing in mind that although you have the use of it for your life, it's still owned by the developer?
That's a very, very good question. So you again have to look at how the life rights development is set up. Sometimes they are layered on top of real rights like sectional title, homeowners association, in which case you would be able to do these types of things the same way that you would in any other sectional title scheme or HOA. If it's only life rights, in other words, there's no real right of ownership that you have, and it's almost something akin to a lease or a user rights, you most certainly wouldn't be able to chop and change as you please. And in most instances, in terms of the contributions that are payable, once unfortunately somebody passes on or is moved out of the scheme, you know, allowances is made for renovations and alterations to bring it up to, you know, a modern standard of living to be able to achieve the next highest contribution going forward. So it would definitely be more restrictive in a straight up life rights development to do anything along these lines. Not that a retired person doesn't want to install a swimming pool, but they might definitely not be able to do that from any type of rule requirement in that scheme. But again, you need to look at the rules.
And then just, sorry, another question that came in from one of our attendees. They were asking, they wanted to do alterations to the facade of the building. Do you require a special resolution for that? So they didn't specify whether they're in an HOA or sectional title. So perhaps you give the answer to both.
Perfectly. So in a homeowners association, again, you have to look at your architectural guidelines, which will be a supporting document to your constitution or your memorandum of incorporation, or your estate rules or conduct rules, or whatever else the document might be called. And they might, for example, say that you have to follow a certain aesthetic rule. So if you go into an estate and everybody has, you know, like a Tuscan style, you obviously can't go and change it to like a Tudor style. Or if everybody's houses are, you know, like a beigey color, you can't suddenly go and paint a purple house. So you definitely are going to be restricted in terms of your aesthetic guidelines. From a sectional title perspective, anything on the outside is common property or potentially an exclusive use area. If it's an exclusive use area, you need an ordinary resolution of the members, which is a simple majority at a meeting where there's a quorum. Or if it is common property, you're going to have to get the trustees' approval, and the trustees can set reasonable conditions unless there is a rule in place that requires that it goes to the members. But again, it's going to be very limited as to what you can do on the common property. You can't go and change the paint color, for example, because that would be the common property as a whole. The Act actually speaks about, you know, driving in nails or screws or something along those lines. So we're looking at really minor things, nothing major. The Act even further goes on to say that if a work is considered to be minor, the consent of the trustees is not even needed. So we're talking about small things that you can do, not the big things, no.
Sure, absolutely. So the moral of the story is read the rules very, very closely. I just wanted to double check, and our time is up. So this is my last question to everyone. So we're talking about renovations here in a smaller capacity, but if you're building your own property at the moment within a residential community and you are, due to COVID and any other of these types of issues that you might have, you've got yourself into a space where you are liable for penalties. My question to Zerlinda then is, what is the process around that dispute resolution if you are liable for penalties? My question to Carla would then be, can you insure yourself against any potential liability? And the same actually to Carol, if I'm using professional installers and applicators, is there some sort of protection around timelines and liability? Zerlinda, if you don't mind just answering that last question for me.
Sure. So before the body corporate or the homeowners association can raise any type of final penalty, they need to have that ability or right in terms of the governance documents. If their constitutional memorandum or conduct rules or management rules don't provide for it, they can't raise it. When it comes to body corporate management and conduct rules, the Community Scheme Ombuds Service has to review and approve those. And when it comes to fines and penalties, they say that they have no issue with it, provided that the amount of the final penalty is not equal to or exceeds a monthly levy. So they can't go and raise, a fine of 50,000 Rand for painting a wrong color or something along those lines. If the levies are 1,500 Rand or 1,200 Rand, the fine can't be more than that. There isn't exactly clarity as to whether or not it can be one fine or a fine raised in a monthly period, like a levy is raised, but there definitely is restriction there. And then, of course, if the fine is raised, it needs to follow a due process. There needs to be a warning. There needs to be a review process. And of course, if the owner says, hey, it wasn't me that did it, or it wasn't my unit, or something along those lines, that fine needs to be reversed or sometimes even brought down. And if there is a challenge on that, that will go to the Community Scheme Ombuds Service for dispute resolution if internally the problem can't get sorted out. From an HOA perspective, the CSOS Community Scheme Ombuds Service doesn't review and approve the governance documentation, although sometimes they do quality assurance. So that amount of the fine could be a little bit more. But again, there needs to be a due process. It needs to be reasonable. It needs to be in line with the offense. And if it is raised, there needs to be a due process that is followed. But without a fining or penalty provision, either in a body corporate or an HOA, we live in a very toothless society, which means there can be no punishment for wrongdoing. So as draconian as it sounds, you have to have fining and penalty rules, especially for the naughty owners that are going to go and paint the wrong color.
Thank you so much, Zerlinda. Carla, just back to you. So going into renovations or having a renovation or doing building your own home, what protection can you put from an insurance perspective into the process when it comes to fines and penalties?
So from an insurance perspective, you should just make sure, once again, that you do have the service providers that you make use of is actually the qualified, excuse me, and they must also have the insurance in place. So in commercial insurance, you get actually very specific fines and penalties insurance. So that would be from your contractor side of things. From your personal capacity, you can always claim on your building's insurance liability portion if there was any damages, but there's no specific fines and penalties insurance that is available to buy unfortunately for personal in your personal perspective. But yeah, if there's any damages to someone else's property, you can have your liability insurance in place, but specifically for fines and penalties, there's nothing you can take out, cover that you can take out.
So potentially the deposit that the homeowners association or body corporate requires before you start the work could come in the form of an insurance guarantee?
So that would come out of your pocket. It will not be something that you can get from your insurer provider.
Tried. Folks, I tried.
Sorry.
No problem. And perhaps Carol, just to close us off there. So and maybe this is more for the managing agents and homeowners associations, using a dedicated sort of applicators and professional applicators, what are the guarantees that we have in place there?
So from a Plascon perspective, we really guaranteeing more from a product performance point of view. And obviously there's legislature around things like leading paints, which obviously governs our industry. So we have a responsibility in terms of making sure that the products are the correct products to put out to a domestic kind of environment, and not, you do get like industrial or protective coatings products, which may be a little bit of a different situation. The applicators that we use do bring their own third-party insurance, and they cover the risk on site in terms of application, the type of equipment that they might be bringing onto site, and they really cover that space themselves. It's not part of what we offer We come as so, we bring our part on the product and they bring their part on getting the product on the wall.
Absolutely. So ladies, thank you so much for your time. And I think the process, what we've established today is once you've gone and got your rules, established what those requirements are, speak to your insurance broker, make sure that you've got the right terms and conditions in place. And don't be scared of any colors that you might want to bring in. Lean on the experts that are available to you. And then, of course, if you are looking at, due to, we all the load shedding we're all experiencing, if you are looking at bringing in those types of additional services, please have a look at our site. And also, again, it's important to speak to your insurance company to make sure that you're covered for those new additional value adds. I just also wanted to, as we leave today, I just also wanted to point out that on both Plascon site and on the Outsurance site, there is a property evaluator function. It's an app or a function that they have available. So if you are wanting to do a bit of a costing and you are wanting to look at what the value could be added to your property, should you choose to do these renovations, these are a very good starting point to have a look at that, because bearing in mind you are adding value and it's important to have the necessary value added, in the lack of a better term. So thank you so much, ladies. Thank you to everybody who's participated today for putting your time aside. We really appreciate your ongoing support. And as I said, this is recorded and we'll send out the recording in the next few days. And those of you who missed the live event will be able to enjoy the recording. We look forward to bringing another Expert Insight series to you. And we'll be covering a few more topics throughout the course of this year and hopefully continue into 2022 with more enjoyable and interesting. And we hope this was informative. Thanks very much, ladies. Clem, don't you want to pop on the video? Thanks.